May 23, 1934, on a quiet road in Louisiana, 6 men hidden in the brush hold their breath. In seconds, a stolen Ford will come around the curve, and what happens in just 16 seconds will unleash more than 160 shots. It is the end of Bonnie and Clyde, planned over 102 days and carried out in seconds. See how it happened. Fact 1. Frank Hamer is recruited. February 1934. Lee Simmons, the head of the Texas prison system, did not trust the job to anyone else. He got in his car and personally went looking for one man. Frank Hamer, nearly 50 years old, a retired Texas Ranger after almost 3 decades of wearing a badge. This was not an ordinary reinstatement. It was a special commission with one target: hunt down Bonnie and Clyde. The couple had been making a mockery of the law for 2 years. Robberies, shootouts, dead police officers. The last straw had come in January of that year, when the gang raided the Eastham prison farm, killed a guard, and freed the inmates. Simmons was direct. He was not going to tell Hamer how to do the job. The old ranger agreed on one condition: he would work his way, alone, with no one breathing down his neck, and with complete authority. The pay was meager, $180 a month, plus a promise of a share of the reward. He did not even blink. With that handshake, the couple's fate was already sealed. They just did not know it yet. Fact 2. The man who couldn't be killed. Before hunting Bonnie and Clyde, Frank Hamer already had a record that seemed impossible on paper. Over the course of his career, he took part in more than 50 shootouts. He was shot 17 times. On 4 separate occasions, he was declared dead, but he wasn't. Records credit him with killing between 53 and 70 men. The first time, he was only 16 years old. A rancher named Dan McSwain tried to hire him to kill a man. Hamer refused. McSwain then shot the boy in the back and in the head and left him lying in a field, thinking it was over. It wasn't. Hamer got back up, and the one who didn't make it through that day was McSwain. The same scene played out again and again over nearly 40 years of wearing a badge. But those who study his life always say the same thing: it wasn't luck, it was method. Hamer never entered a confrontation without first securing the advantage, the position, the distance, and the first shot. He set the stage and only then moved in. Bonnie and Clyde had already traded gunfire with plenty of lawmen, but they had never faced this kind of hunter. Fact 3. Ambushed in Sweetwater. October 1st, 1917. Frank Hamer was returning from a court hearing when 2 men stopped him with a warning: "Don't go through Sweetwater. There are people waiting there to kill you." The trouble came from a feud between his wife Gladys's family and the relatives of her ex-husband, Ed Sims. Hamer listened to the warning, strapped a second gun to his waist, and went into town anyway. He stopped because of a flat tire. That was when G. McMeans, a former ranger and former sheriff, and a young man named Red Phillips came after him. Hamer was shot twice. A shotgun blast tore off part of his hat and knocked him to his knees. He got back up. He drew his revolver and shot McMeans in the heart, killing him on the spot. Phillips ran and was arrested later. And there is one more detail. A jury was meeting across the street and watched the entire shootout through the window. 5 days later, it ruled that Hamer had acted within the law. 17 years later, this was the man hunting Bonnie and Clyde. Fact 4. Method, not luck. What made Hamer dangerous was not a gunfighter's instinct or beginner's luck. It was preparation. He studied his target before making a move, and he had an almost photographic memory that held on to every detail. In a shootout, most men at the time sprayed bullets everywhere and hoped for the best. Not Hamer. He said he would bring the gun up to eye level, take aim, and finish it with a single shot. He preferred fighting with a rifle whenever possible, but he also practiced long-range pistol shooting because he knew he would not always have a rifle in his hands when the time came. For the hunt for Bonnie and Clyde, he was even more calculating. He bought a specific handgun, a Colt Super 38, for one very practical reason. Its ammunition could punch through a car's metal body. Hamer knew the couple practically lived inside stolen cars, slept in them, and escaped in them. So he deliberately chose a weapon capable of piercing steel. While Bonnie and Clyde raced through the darkness, the man hunting them had already studied even the routes they usually took. Fact 5. The prison that created Clyde. To understand why that ambush ended in gunfire instead of handcuffs, you have to go back to Eastham. In April 1930, Clyde Barrow, barely over 20 years old, entered the Eastham prison farm to serve 14 years of hard labor. It was one of the worst prisons in Texas. Inside, an older and stronger inmate named Ed Crowder, known as Big Ed, repeatedly beat and abused him. One day, Clyde could not take it anymore. He waited for Crowder and killed him with a lead pipe. He was the first man Clyde ever killed. Another inmate, who was already serving a life sentence, took the blame. Later, to escape working in the fields, Clyde had 2 of his own toes cut off with an axe. 6 days later, he was released. His mother had been asking for a pardon, and Governor Ross Sterling signed it. He walked out on crutches, with a limp he would have for the rest of his life, and changed on the inside. A friend who saw it all summed it up. He went in a kid and came out a rattlesnake. And Clyde made a silent promise that he would never return to a cell alive. Fact 6. The methodical manhunt. Hamer did not go out shooting. He sat down and studied. For about 102 days, from February to May 1934, he and his longtime partner, Maney Galt, traveled through Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Missouri, looking for a pattern. They slept in the car, ate crackers and sardines, and drove 500 miles a day. And the pattern appeared. Bonnie and Clyde always traveled in a large circle, with fixed points: Dallas, Texas, Joplin, Missouri, and northwestern Louisiana. They always stayed close to state lines, and there was a cold, practical reason for that. At the time, a police officer could not chase a fugitive into another state. Clyde had mastered that trick, but his habit became his own trap. He repeated the route so often that Hamer began predicting his next move, and he noticed something. The couple kept going back to visit family. One of their accomplices, Henry Methvin, had parents living in rural Louisiana. Hamer was not chasing them in the rearview mirror. He was positioning himself ahead of them. And he used to say that when he began to understand how Clyde's mind worked, he felt he was getting close. Fact 7. The family trap. In the middle of all that analysis, Hamer found the opening. One of the accomplices, Henry Methvin, had family in rural northern Louisiana, and Clyde had made a rule with the group. If they ever got separated, the meeting point would be the Methvin house. That was exactly what happened. Henry got separated from the couple in Shreveport. Bonnie and Clyde were going to return to that house, and Hamer knew it. Then came the coldest move in the entire story. Henry's father, Ivy Methvin, was terrified. He knew his son would end up dead or in prison alongside the couple. So he made a deal with the law, arranged through the local sheriff, Henderson Jordan. He would hand over Bonnie and Clyde in exchange for a pardon for his own son. Hamer agreed immediately. The gang stopped by the Methvin house from time to time, and Ivy would alert the law as soon as the couple was on the way. Think about the irony. In the end, it was not the law that brought the couple down. It was a father's love, willing to betray his son's friends to save him. Now everything depended on just one thing, that they showed up on that road one more time. Fact 8. The obsession with cars. There was one thing Clyde loved almost as much as Bonnie. the Ford V8. It was the fastest car money could buy at the time, faster than most police cars. Clyde did not pay for them. He stole one whenever he came across it. He liked them so much that he reportedly wrote a letter to Henry Ford himself praising the engine. The letter, dated April 10, 1934, is kept at the Ford Museum in Dearborn. Some people doubt it is authentic, but it exists. And here is the irony. The car that gave the couple freedom was the same thing that made them predictable. Anyone who studied their habits already knew they would show up in a stolen Ford V8, flying down a dirt road. The last one was a gray 1934 Ford with an 85-horsepower V8, stolen from Ruth Warren's garage in Topeka, Kansas on April 29th. And Clyde could drive like few others. No one behind the wheel of a Ford could catch him. But the same speed that kept them ahead of the law would deliver them to the right curve on the right day. Hamer only had to wait for that engine to appear on the horizon. Fact 9. The chosen curve. On May 21, 1934, the posse gathered near Gibbsland, Louisiana. There were 6 men: Hamer, his longtime partner Maney Galt, and Texas officers Bob Alcorn and Ted Hinton, along with 2 local lawmen, Sheriff Henderson Jordan and Deputy Prentice Oakley. They chose the spot, a stretch of State Highway 154 south of Gibbsland, on the road to the Methvin house. On one side, thick woods offered plenty of cover, and they left old Ivy Methvin's truck parked on the side of the road to force Clyde to slow down right in front of their guns. Each man marked his position and field of fire, and they were heavily armed. Each carried an automatic rifle, a shotgun, and a revolver. They were prepared to punch through the metal body of a moving car. Then the waiting began. At around 9 that night, the 6 men slipped into the trees and stayed there, motionless, through the entire day of May 22nd. Nothing. Cold, exhausted, and close to giving up. No sign of the Ford on the road. The couple had no idea, and they did not know there was only one morning left. Fact 10. The automatic weapons. Hamer left nothing to chance when it came to firepower. Each of the 6 men carried the same thing: an automatic rifle, a shotgun, and pistols. And these were not just any rifles. The main weapon was the bar, the Browning automatic rifle, a .30-06 military weapon. That bullet could punch through one car door and come out the other side. Ted Hinton carried a Colt Monitor, a version of the bar that Hamer had obtained directly from Colt. Hamer carried a Remington Model 8. And here comes the irony. The bar was Clyde's favorite weapon, and he stole those rifles from National Guard armories. In the end, he would die under fire from the same weapon he loved so much. The plan was cold and direct. Open fire with the rifles first, then the shotguns, then the pistols. The officers themselves said they emptied their rifles before the car even got close. More than 130 shots in total. Against 2 people who would never surrender, the difference in firepower had already decided everything before the first gunshot. Bonnie and Clyde would not even have time to draw a weapon. Fact 11. Waiting in the brush. One thing is worth remembering here. Those 6 men did not arrive only on the morning of the 23rd. They had already been there since the night of the 21st, hidden in the brush along Highway 154, nearly a day and a half lying on the ground. When dawn broke on the 23rd, they were exhausted, soaked with dew, eaten alive by mosquitoes, and barely having slept. Ted Hinton, one of the officers, later said the group was close to giving up. The road remained empty, no cars, no sound. But no one moved, staying still and silent, with a finger near the trigger, hour after hour, takes a kind of discipline few people have. That morning, old Ivy Methvin parked his truck by the road as bait, so the Ford would stop right in front of them. 2 of the men, Alcorn and Hinton, knew the couple by sight and would confirm the target. Everyone knew that when the moment came, they would have only a few seconds to act. The sun rose over the empty road. At around 9 in the morning, the silence broke. In the distance, an engine, coming fast. Fact 12. The Ford appears. 9:15 in the morning. The gray Ford V8 appeared on the road, coming fast, with Clyde behind the wheel and Bonnie beside him. Clyde was driving as usual, wearing socks but no shoes, a habit he had carried with him since prison. The car began to slow down. Clyde recognized old Methvin's truck parked on the side of the road and took his foot off the gas to see what was going on. It was exactly what the lawman had planned. The Ford stopped almost on top of the brush where the 6 men were waiting. For a moment, everything stood still. The engine idling low, the morning frozen, 6 gun barrels locked on target. Inside the car, neither of them suspected a thing. Bonnie, according to some accounts, was holding a sandwich. Alcorn and Hinton, who knew them by sight, quietly confirmed it. It was them. It was the last normal moment of the couple's lives. And then the plan to order them under arrest fell apart. Deputy Prentice Oakley fired first, probably before any command was given. In the next second, the other 5 opened fire. Fact 13. The 16 seconds. It all happened at once. The first shot, fired by Deputy Prentice Oakley, struck Clyde in the head and killed him instantly. With no one in control, the car kept rolling toward the edge of the ditch, and the 6 men did not stop shooting. They say it lasted about 16 seconds. In that short span of time, the officers poured around 130 rounds into the Ford, with some accounts putting the number as high as 167. Why so many? Years later, Hinton's son explained what was going through those men's minds. That man had already escaped a dozen traps, and no one there wanted to risk getting it wrong again. The car's body was turned into a sieve. The windshield had more holes than glass. They later said the gunfire left them temporarily deaf. Inside the car, there was no return fire. Neither of them managed to pull the trigger. And according to some accounts, Bonnie could be heard screaming through the barrage. The coroner's report would count 17 gunshot wounds in Clyde and 26 in Bonnie. When the echo of the gunfire faded, the 2 most wanted names in America were dead in the front seat. Fact 14. The bodies and the car. When the smoke cleared, silence followed, and it was just as frightening as the gunfire. The Ford sat on the side of the road, riddled with bullets, a heap of punctured metal. Inside, Clyde was slumped over the steering wheel, and Bonnie had collapsed in the seat beside him. Both dead, right there in the front. Clyde was 25 years old, Bonnie only 23. The 6 men slowly stepped out of the brush, still holding their weapons, barely able to believe it was over. They opened the car and found a full arsenal. Several automatic rifles, sawed-off shotguns, pistols, dozens of loaded magazines, and around 3,000 rounds of ammunition. Clyde had been prepared for a war he never had time to fight. The 102-day manhunt had ended there, on that dirt curve near Gibbsland, Louisiana. It was fast and cold, exactly as Hamer had planned. But the calm did not last long. News spread across the area in the blink of an eye, and from every direction, people began heading down the road toward that car. Fact 15. The Souvenir Hunters. The news spread before the bodies had even gone cold. Before long, people came from every direction and surrounded the car. And then a scene began that was hard to believe. People wanted a piece of the legend. They pulled out shards of glass, pieces of upholstery, bits of metal, and shell casings from the ground. One woman cut locks of Bonnie's hair and pieces of her dress, then went off selling them as souvenirs. One man tried to cut off Clyde's ear. Another rushed toward the body, trying to take his trigger finger, and Deputy Ted Hinton had to shove him back. The 6 lawmen, who only minutes earlier had controlled every detail of the ambush, could barely handle the crowd now. There was not even enough time to properly protect the scene. So they hooked the Ford to a tow truck and dragged the car, with the bodies still inside, to the town of Arcadia. Arcadia had about 2,000 residents. Within a few hours, it would become a swarm of thousands of curious onlookers. Fact 16. What was left? After it was all over, Frank Hamer disappeared from the headlines and went back to a quiet life. But his name was never the same again. That ambush, with no chance to surrender, became a subject of debate for the rest of his life. Some called it justice. Others called it an execution. The families made sure the two were buried separately. And here is a detail few people know. Bonnie Parker's final wish was to be laid to rest beside Clyde Barrow. They did not allow it. Her mother refused. So even in death, the couple who became a legend remained apart. Think about it. A quiet man no one paid much attention to spent 102 days putting the plan together. He studied every road, every habit, every schedule. And when the time came, it took only 16 seconds of gunfire on that Louisiana road in May 1934. 16 seconds that brought down 2 outlaws the entire country could not get out of its mind.